They're both very humble, very gracious. They both have a good sense of humor. They're wonderful to work with. They're excellent colleagues.
Meet UNC Charlotte professors of psychology Lawrence Calhoun and Rich Tedeschi, the recipients of the First Citizens Bank Scholars Medal. These two pioneers have collaborated on groundbreaking research on growth from adversity, which has become one of the most researched concepts in the behavioral sciences. Their partnership began nearly 30 years ago, and there are no signs of it ending anytime soon.
Well, this was back in the early 80s, wasn't it?
Yep. My recollection is Rich and I were writing to a conference. We both finished up programs of research on different things, and we were simply conversing about what we were going to do next, and we said, wouldn't it be interesting to find people who've dealt with really bad stuff but have coped really well? And that was sort of the beginning.
One of their biggest contributions was the development of a measuring tool they named the Post-Traumatic Growth Inventory. It's a 21-item scale to measure and assess positive outcomes reported by individuals who have gone through traumatic episodes in their lives. It is the most widely used and cited measure of post-traumatic growth and has been translated into roughly 20 languages.
It all seems to have coalesced into these 5 major areas of growth that we've ended up looking at. And, there are changes in how people relate to other people, changes in their spiritual, existential beliefs, a sense of new possibilities in life, new opportunities that wouldn't have been there otherwise, a greater appreciation for their personal strength, and appreciation for life in general.
So because of these studies, the Japanese government even recognize and understand the possibility of the personal growth as a human being. And before that, all of the physicians or psychiatrists or psychologists, we just focus on the negative symptoms. And of course, there was a possible for the personal growth, but until they actually started doing the research, the professionals only focus on the negative symptoms. So they really are the icons, and they really change the world, how we look at the trauma.
The pair has published 6 books since 1995, with the latest released earlier this year.
It's called Post-Traumatic Growth in Clinical Practice, and it's written for clinicians, but also for the layperson as well. But the general framework is that the clinician is an expert in many ways, but in other ways is simply a companion.
The core elements of this is listening to people in a way which allows oneself to be changed rather than being intent on changing this other person you're working with.
While their research is extremely complex and can be difficult to comprehend to the non-psychologist, the two men can discuss it in practical terms to illustrate how an individual can experience change or growth while suffering from the effects of trauma.
Even though the suffering may continue in some form, what growth provides is some kind of meaning to the suffering. So it isn't just all in vain, that there's some other aspect to the suffering that people can actually value.
And another point to emphasize is that the experience of transformative growth does not mean that suffering ceases.
Both Tedeschi and Calhoun acknowledge they have been personally affected by their work.
You know, one of the things that I think is so different about the kind of research that we've done is that it's so much part of the understanding of living life well, that we can apply to ourselves, and that we, you know, we've been fortunate enough to hit upon a research area that we can really take to heart and use to inform us about how to live our own lives.
And their area of concentration has become acutely relevant in this time and place.
You know, we've been through a time the past 10 years or so in this country where there's been a lot of public attention to trauma because of what's happened in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so we've got a lot of traumatized people who have returned to this country. And I'm hoping that many of those people who have served in the military and their families also derive some benefit from the kinds of things that Lawrence and I have been writing about.
It even comes closer to home than that. Tedeschi explains.
You know, my father was a Marine in World War II, and you know, I learned, he died when I was a kid, but I learned by looking at his records just in recent years that he had post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of his service in the Pacific. In some ways, I've perhaps gotten involved in this work with trauma survivors, and maybe because of him, although I didn't know it very consciously, but there's certainly a link in my life back to that.